Listen, I'm used to year-end lists. I love year-end lists, but what I still haven't gotten used to is a former president of the United States listening to the same songs as me. Like, Obama and I both love British rapper Central C. That's weird to me. Today on the podcast, how did Barack Obama become a cultural force? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. It has been 7 years since Barack Obama left the White House, and often you see presidents who focus on charitable work or maybe take up a hobby like painting so much that it makes you go, the guy who started the Iraq War is painting portraits now? Some presidents enjoy the relaxing pastime of appearing in a courtroom a lot, but those are not the choices of Barack Obama. Obama really is a cultural force. He won an Emmy Award on Saturday for outstanding narration of a documentary. It's not even his first Emmy. His production company, Higher Ground, has been making acclaimed movies lately, including Rustin, American Symphony, and Leave the World Behind. And, of course, there are his year-end lists. His favorite movies, his favorite books, his favorite music, which this year ran the gamut from Mitski to Megan Thee Stallion. Jennifer Zhan wrote about Obama's cultural output and input for Vulture recently. And we've got NPR's TV critic Eric Deggans here. Eric, Jennifer, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Going great.
I'm happy. I'm happy that you guys are here. Jennifer, what stood out for you about this year's list from Obama?
I think the internet definitely latched on to the fact that Oppenheimer made the list, but Barbie didn't. I know that was like a big thing this summer. And but yeah, I also know, he had to note his little bias for films from his own production company that he put on the list. But honestly, I can't say that anything like stunned me too much. I think in general, his lists consistently do represent like different genres, different demographics, and also come from like pretty consistently diverse group of creatives every year. So you always kind of do expect, oh, he's going to have something that like might appeal to Gen Z, and then also like to older people. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something kind of vaguely democratic about it. There's something for everybody on those lists. Eric, he's been sharing these lists since his last year in office. If we're talking about his musical picks in particular, do they reveal something to you about his character or how he wants to be seen and positioned? It's something that surprised you, that makes you go, "Oh, is this really how he wants to be known?"
Well, no, what I would say about Obama, and I'm assuming you meant small d Democratic, not Democratic Party.
Yes.
But the thing about Obama is he's like that really cool uncle who sees everything in pop culture, knows all the coolest songs, is watching all the hippest movies, and is conversant with all the hippest streaming, and then talks to you about it on your level. And so I think the thing that's interesting to me about Obama is that he is so conversant with pop culture. We are not used to seeing this in presidents because most of the presidents that we've had have been older, especially since Bill Clinton's era. And well, I'm forgetting George W. Bush, for many reasons. But, these are presidents that have often seemed detached from pop culture, and their connection to it is to sort of make fun of their distance from it because they're politicians and they act as if they inhabit a different world.
Yeah.
Barack Obama, I think, is our most pop culture savvy president, certainly in modern times, even more than Bill Clinton. Rather than being someone who sort of reflected and bounced off pop culture, he was immersed in it even when he was president. When he spoke during the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he was as funny as the comics that they brought in to be the entertainment. Yeah. He could act. He always was conversant in rap and more popular, breaking forms of music than anyone, even in his generation. And he also has this image of sort of being the ultimate sort of upper class Black person. He can talk about rap, but he's also very fond of Beyonce, and he's also very fond of Prince. Yes. So he can bridge a lot of different generations, even among Black people,
Yeah.
his picks. And so that's
So-
why I think people pay attention to what he's doing.
So I want to talk about those picks. You know, Jennifer last year, Hassan Minhaj really put Obama on the spot. Let's take a moment to listen to that exchange.
I need you to look me in the eyes.
Yes.
And be honest with me.
Always.
Mr. President, when you do your end of the year lists,
Yes.
do you really read all those books, watch all those shows, and listen to all those songs?
I do. Listen,
No, you don't.
I am so glad that I had this opportunity.
Please.
People, they believe the books and the movies, but the playlists, they somehow think, and this is mostly coming from young people like you,
Yeah.
somehow y'all think you invented rock and roll, you invented hip hop. People seem to think, well, he must have had some 20-year-old intern who was figuring out, you know, this latest cut. No, man, it's on my iPad right now.
Jennifer, is Obama...
Let me just say, I agree. I feel that's me.
Come on, though. Like, Jennifer, is Obama right now in the crib, you know, making lunch, listening to Mitski? Is that what I'm supposed to believe right now? Do you believe him?
Here's the thing. I think so elsewhere in that same interview that we just listened to, he says he does admit, like, I do take suggestions, but like it stands by, like, I do read, listen, watch all of these things. So I think that's actually like pretty illuminating, because if you look at it, like, you know, he has 20 something songs on these lists, like 15 books. Do I believe that he could read 15 books in a year? Like, sure, a lot of people read that many books in a year.
Yeah.
But I think what's implied, like, when you make these kinds of lists is that you are consuming a lot more than that, because these are like your favorites. These are like your picks that you're curating. So, you know, he always comes out with these lists that, you know, represent different genres. They're like you said before, like they seem like intentionally, like almost like there were focus groups on how can we hit on each of these things. So it's like, do I think he's keeping up with all of these trends? Like every week, is he tuning in for new and rising artists, reading like these different books and watching all the films that are coming out, so that at the end of the year he comes together? I don't know. That seems like a big ask to me. But if I'm thinking, okay, he's like admitting to like having maybe a team that like sends him like, I think you might like this, then it seems like that's a bit more doable. I mean, there's a reason that like there are full-time critics who do this kind of thing. So long answer, but I think that, you know, his name is associated with these lists, so he has a reason to like want to make sure that nothing he hates is on here. I do think that it's reasonable to think that he listens to everything on the lists, but like some of that legwork behind it, I do think he gets help with that, and that's okay.
Yeah, but you know what it is that makes people go, I don't know if he's really listening to those songs, Eric, is like the idea that, you know, is Obama listening to Toxic Trait by Stormzy? I don't know if he is. I can't imagine a context in real life where Barack Obama is like being ferried to an event and he's got like his AirPods in and he's listening to Water by Tyla. I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening because like those songs are so
that
new.
Might be more you issue than an Obama issue.
Okay, tell me about that. Why is that a me issue?
I mean, seriously, you know,
Yeah.
There's no evidence that he's not doing this.
That's true.
You know, I mean, you know, just because again, that's why we're paying so much attention to Obama, because we have not seen people who've reached his stature as immersed in pop culture as he is. But as you said in the intro to this whole discussion, you know, he's already so immersed in pop culture in so many ways. He already has Emmys. He already has, accolades, and it's already produced.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the three movies that Higher Ground has executive produced this past year, they're all up for major awards.
Higher Ground is
like
Obama's production company. Yeah. But yes.
It's not as if he's just executive producing things that are passion projects for kind of, you know, hey, let's pay attention to the environment and let's eat our broccoli while we watch television. There are things
that have a voice, like a very specific
that
kind
are
of,
serious contenders for major awards and that are on the cutting edge of pop culture. So I don't understand why it's so hard to imagine that someone who is like that is also in the cutting edge of pop culture and everything they consume. And he talks about, when you ask him about these works, he talks about them in a way that makes it hard to doubt that he hasn't actually consumed them all and actually likes them all.
Yeah, no. Hey, my apologies to Barack Obama, who's probably firing up the Rap Caviar playlist as we speak, checking out like the new arrivals on the playlist. Jennifer, I want to talk about something that is complicated about all of this, which is there's a cultural weight, right, of making onto these playlists and these lists. Some of it is positive, right? There's a glow of like, hey, I got the Obama publicity. That's really lovely. There are also people who don't want to be associated with Barack Obama. Like, yes, he has sway. Yes, he's, but he's very famous, but also he's still a former president of a superpower. He massively expanded the U.S. drone program. When he put Boy Genius in his summer playlist last summer, Lucy Dacus quote tweeted it with the caption, "War criminal" and sad face. How does that land for you?
I think it's to be expected. Like you said, he's like part of the reason people are tuning in to these lists are because they know him, and part of the reason they know him is because of his political career. Yeah. I did notice that Boy Genius did not make it onto his end of year list after that. Yeah. So, I think these lists are intended to make him seem like, whether it's like how intentional it is or not, I can't say for sure, but more down to earth, more likable. He always captions them like, let me know what else I should listen to. Like, this is like a guy you can talk to, and that goes both ways. Like, if he's opening it up to conversation, like, I'm this approachable sort of cultural figure, then there are going to be people who want to respond by saying like, actually, there are like criticisms that I have of you. Yeah. And Lucy wasn't the only one. I think when Ethel Cain made it on the 2022 list with American Teenager, like responded with surprise because like Ethel felt like the song was like an anti-war, anti-patriotism song. It was just like, it's interesting that a former president put this on a list. And even like outside of like the artists or people who are on the list themselves, I feel like I see every year like some viral tweets of just, non-famous people on social media reacting. Like, I don't like seeing these lists because he's done XYZ that I feel has been harmful. Yeah, and those normally go pretty viral.
This is it. It's tough to, I think, square the two of them. Eric, what about you? Where do you land on this idea?
Well, part of me thinks, this notion that, part of living in a representative democracy is that you're not going to agree with everything the president does. Sure. And being on a list where the president says, I like your song, shouldn't be seen as the president saying, you agree with me politically, or you agree with everything I did when I was president. Mm-hmm. Part of it, I think, is a reflection of the times where we have some presidents who are quite propagandistic in their use of platforms like these, and will try to co-opt artists and make it seem as if those artists support them politically. But I don't think that's what Barack Obama is doing. And frankly, I think some of that is a little, it strikes me as a little rude, a little improper, whatever. I mean, if you want to criticize Obama, that's great. Mm-hmm. But the guy's just saying he liked your song. Right. And if he's expansive enough to like a song where the message, part of it is critical of him, frankly, we should be supporting that and celebrating that and saying, we want leaders who are big enough to say, I like this song, even though it's critical of something that I did. And if there's any president who's capable of doing that, I think it would be Barack Obama, who's been willing to acknowledge criticisms and talk with critics and not invalidate them. And again, we're in a political moment where it seems to be really hard for some other politicians to do that. So I would just suggest that we all sort of take a breath and sort of understand that saying that you like somebody's song doesn't mean that you're saying they endorse your politics, or that the person who likes your song endorses all of your politics.
Obama as a cultural force, as a tastemaker, as a force in Hollywood. That tells us that so much of our world right now is changing in terms of the way that, certain voices get elevated. Eric, Jennifer, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Jennifer Zhan is a culture writer for Vulture based in Obama's hometown of Chicago. Eric Deggans is NPR's TV critic. He was in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Goodbye, so long, farewell, all I'll be.
I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. That song is one of Barack Obama's favorite songs right now. Also one of my favorite songs right now. That's The Returner from Montreal's own Alison Russell. That track appeared on Obama's 2023 playlist, the one that we just talked about. And that endorsement capped off a really big year for Alison Russell. Okay, she picked up 4 Grammy nominations. She got to perform with Joni Mitchell. But here's the thing. When you look at best of 2023 lists from the biggest publications, Pitchfork, Rolling Stone, Stereogum, NME in the UK, you're not going to find Alison's record on there. In fact, you're barely going to find any Canadians on any of them. Michael Barclay, the veteran music journalist, wrote about this. He asked a big question. Are we slipping back into 1990s tragically hip era where only Canadians care about Canadian bands? Michael's here to talk about this. Michael, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy that you're here. Listen, in 2022, you put out a book called Hearts on Fire. It looked at how Canadian music blew up in the US and Europe in the 2000s, thanks to indie artists like Peaches, Arcade Fire, Broken Social Scene. And that moment ended up being kind of the warm-up for the 2010s when we had Drake, The Weeknd, Justin Bieber dominate everywhere. These days, you're getting the sense that, there's a bit less love for Canadian music abroad. At what point did you notice that change starting to happen?
I think first I want to clarify, I'm talking about critically. I'm talking about the lists. I think Canadians continue to be very successful, and we can point to many examples. So I'm just going to focus on the niche, navel-gazing music critics that nobody pays attention to anymore.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and Canadians were all but invisible. Like, it was very rare to see Canadians in those kind of discussions.
Yeah.
And then my book was about a time when that definitely changed. But I'd say at least the last 5 years or so, it feels like things have dropped. I mean, the early 2000s, you had the artists you mentioned, your Arcade Fires, Broken Social Scenes, Feist, but a whole bunch of other ones, New Pornographers, Stars, Caribou, Tegan and Sarah, everywhere on all those kinds of lists, very big critical favorites. And a lot of those people benefited from early online culture. And then that led to the next wave of online culture. Like, if you look at Drake and Bieber and The Weeknd, those were all surprise online success stories. They all leveraged kind of social media at that time to really do an end run around the mainstream industry and be successful.
That's a good point. We forget about the social media origins of those artists, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now we just think of them, they're just major corporate entities. But it's like, no, those were like totally like word of mouth Tumblr. Like,
The Weeknd was a Tumblr artist. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, that's why those people are an extension of the people I talked about, even though so many things are different about them. But I mean, if you look at recently, I just feel like there's, what we call memory hole. Like, that record came out 8 months ago. It feels like 5 years ago. I was thinking of someone like Orville Peck, in 2022, great record, came out early in the year. Lots of attention, sold lots of tickets, amazing live show. I didn't see that record on any year-end list in 2022. And last year was an anomaly where the Toronto band Always did extremely well. Like, they were in like top 5 of many lists.
Yeah.
But I feel like that is the anomaly. And a couple of years earlier, the Weather Station did that. A couple of years before that, the U.S. Girls did that. But I feel like in general, Canadians are not part of those critical discussions anymore. Again, not to say that Canadians are not commercially successful, they are, but
it's not. I mean, it's one thing to have this feeling, but you did data work for this. I mean, you crunched the numbers, specifically looking at 2023. Tell us a little bit about the methodology and what you actually found out.
So I looked at a lot of lists, and there's a friend of mine who also helpfully provided me with a lot of links. Yeah. But they're the ones I read regularly, like The Guardian or Pitchfork or NPR or these kinds of lists, and many others. And I actually found out, when I initially wrote the piece in my newsletter, I was all like, things are terrible in 2023. But it actually wasn't too bad compared to, say, 2019, where there was nobody. Oh, wow. I didn't see any Canadians at all. So this year, there were a couple of random things. Yeah. So anyway, this year I looked at 21 lists from US and UK, and there were only 4 artists that appeared on more than 3 lists, and they were not who I thought they were going to be. Mm-hmm. The top one, the one that appeared the most, and usually near the bottom, but still, was Catrimine, which is the duo, and arguably not Canadian, but it's a duo of Montreal. Catronada from Montreal and the Portland, Oregon rapper Emine. So that's 50% Canadian. So, is that a Canadian record? Would the Junos agree? Would Factor agree? I don't know.
I don't imagine that they would. Listen, I mentioned Alison Russell off the top. Who are some other Canadian artists you expected to see on this year's list but didn't?
Well, the big one for me was Daniel Caesar. I mean, it's
right.
Daniel Caesar is not an obscure name.
No.
Like he gets Grammy nominations. He played the arena in Toronto, the Raptors arena.
Yeah.
He plays amphitheaters. And critics do love him and write about him. But I saw him on only a couple of lists, and again, not very close to the top. Maybe because there's so much competition in that genre. Like R&B is very much an American genre, and maybe there's only room for The Weeknd. I have no idea. And then on kind of the other side of the spectrum, Feist, who shows up in my book, got rave reviews for her new record, especially for her live show. But she rarely showed up on these lists, although she appeared on a couple. Someone like Jeremy Dutcher, I thought, a unique artist in so many ways.
Yeah.
And little glimmers, but really not much. And then Debbie Friday, who won the Polaris Prize, did make one of the New York Times critics top.
I was going to say that was only on one list, Lindsay's old ass list. That's right. So right now we're going to hear from one Canadian band that turned up the most on international year-end lists, and it is not a group that you and I would have ever guessed. I'm awake, Michael. I'm up.
Caffeine.
I'm up and an alert. That is Toronto's own Two Mold, who are a very big deal in the death metal world, according to you, pal, because I was not familiar with Two Mold. I am now. They're a Canadian band who turn up the most on the best of 2023 lists from top music sites, like including Pitchfork, NPR, and Bandcamp. Michael, we got maybe like a couple of minutes here. What does it say about this moment in Canadian music that this niche band like Two Mold is getting on the same list that more popular artists like Feist once were?
Well, I think that it speaks to the diversification of genre. I mean, critics tend to look more far afield. You've got this weird push and pull. Like on the one hand, it's like consensus world where it's like every list had SZA, every list had Boy Genius, every list had Lana Del Rey. But then the long tail after that gets really long and really obscure and pretty random. Yeah. And Two Mold are, it's not my area of expertise, but the people who love that kind of music hold them up like this is exemplary. This is like the most creative artist in this genre. So that helps break it through in the same way that, someone like a Caribou might make it on lists of people who don't listen to a lot of electronic music, Right. But that hurts someone like maybe Charlotte Cardin, who's operating in a very crowded field for mainstream attention, right? But I mean, there are no normal trajectories anymore. I mean, one of my favorite stories of last year was the Beaches, right?
Yes.
Toronto band, 10 years on a major label, they get dropped. They then put out the best album they've ever made. Like every track on that record is great.
Yeah.
And they become a TikTok sensation, millions of views.
Yeah.
And that's a song they actively tried to make go viral and were failing until they just posted this very normal looking, here I am in the studio singing the song. And that's what blows up. So how do you predict that? And now they're selling out venues across the US and Europe.
Yeah.
Mind you, but they're not on these critics lists. So again, do critics matter? Like, does this discussion even matter? But the Beaches.
It matters to me, pal.
Yeah, the Beaches should be there right next to Olivia Rodrigo on these lists because it's the same caliber to me.
Well, Michael, we got to leave it there, but I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for being here and talking about these lists. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
We could go on.
We sure could. Michael Barclay is an author, a music journalist in Toronto. For more on his thoughts on Canadian music, check out his recent book, Hearts on Fire, and you can subscribe to his Substack newsletter, Airplane on a Highway. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Hey, we're going to do this again tomorrow, so if you've got time, squeeze us in. We'll be here. See you then.